Hey everybody, welcome back. Change your perspective, change your awareness, change your life. I'm Dr. Michelina AF, hashtag that felon doctor, here to talk about abandonment wound. All right, we're talking about wounds in this series, and basically any sort of wound that we're calling, this series is something that we receive pretty much almost always from an outside source. So we've got some kind of adversity that happens, usually something that has to do with loss, grief, fear, and we internalize it. And then what's the word I'm looking for? Not cultivate. I don't want to say cultivate. We develop. That's what I want to say. We develop a wound in that area. Okay, so abandonment wound, this is a big and very hot topic nowadays in the coaching community, in the psych community, in therapy. Like, a lot of us have abandonment wounds because a lot of us are product of divorces. And by us, I mean my generation, the generation that is like 25 to 45. A lot of us are the product of divorces. However, we all are a product of loss. Everybody loses people or things that matter to them. And that is just a fact of life. And even though that is a fact of life, for whatever reason, we don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to deal when we lose things. And so, the tough thing about the abandonment wound, and let me just define it. Abandonment wound is basically fear or anxiety that develops because of the loss of, or a perceived loss of a loved one, not a judged one, of a loved one, okay? And so, if you lost anybody close to you, or you lost a house, or you lost a situation, or you lost resources, pretty much at any time in your life, but the earlier, the more problematic, you can develop an abandonment wound, right? So if you're like, and this has happened, I've seen this with clients a lot, like at 13, they like lost a grandparent that they loved, or a divorce happened, or something. There's going to be an abandonment wound there, right? And that one is a pretty obvious one. I didn't realize, because when you're an adolescent and hormones are going and like changes are happening, everybody's expecting change between like 12 and 15 because we just are changing, our bodies change. For me, I didn't realize I had an abandonment wound that developed early on in my life when my father left. Okay, and I love my father. We have a great relationship. Like he was there in some capacities, but like when I was 3, he left. And so from 0 to 3, now, I don't remember any of this. I virtually don't. I know that my mother told me I used to look out the window for him like a puppy. I used to look out the window for when he was coming home. And she was like, it would break my heart because like he wasn't coming back. And I didn't know that consciously. But subconscious tiny Michelina knew that she was looking for her dad and he wasn't there. Now, my brother and sister didn't have this. They don't have this. I guess because I'm older, I don't really know, but I do, very much so. But I didn't even know that I had it because it's like things that happen between like 0 to 7, we don't always cognize. They happen to us, we act out of it, but we don't remember it because 0 to 7, we're in theta state. So if you have had any kind of extreme loss, possibly neglect, rejection, in those 0 to 7 phases, you're gonna have probably an abandonment / we'll talk about this more tomorrow, the rejection wound that you don't even realize you have and or are functioning out of. So how did that manifest in my life, right? I picked partners, male partners, who were emotionally unavailable all the time. I picked people that didn't have to show up for me. I was also emotionally unavailable. I didn't really care to show up as much for them. Like, I didn't pick good partners as a result. This happens a lot, right? And the abandonment wound, also, when you've got an extreme abandonment wound, you can develop things like borderline personality disorder and other disorders, which I realize I've got BPD. And I didn't know that until recently. And it was very uncomfortable to find out that, like, I was like, I've been doing so much work. Why can't I regulate my emotions? And now, admittedly, emotions are hard to regulate. But, like, I was like, there is something amiss here. What is going on? And sure enough, I checked myself back into therapy, and I was like, why is this happening this way? And I was praying a lot about it, and I was like, God, what is going on? And then this came up, and I was like, oh, yes, that makes sense. And I'm like, why do I have a deep abandonment wound? Oh, here's why. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Now, so the thing that's super important to know about the abandonment wound, before anybody tells you otherwise, is that it doesn't mean nobody's ever shown up for you in your life. Because, like, my mother has always shown up for me. Always. That woman has never abandoned me. She never will leave me. She's like Jesus, right? Won't leave me, won't forsake me. Like, that woman is always there. So it's not about not having someone in your corner. It's about the loss or perceived loss of somebody that you care about. And so you can have an abandonment wound that develops, is onset. You can have an abandonment wound anytime you lose something or someone. And it can be about anything you care about because it's an emotional loss. So if your parents divorced, if you had a dog that you loved that died, because it has to do with not knowing how to analyze the loss and feeling like you have been abandoned despite how natural the process is that whoever left you. And you internalize it. And that is just... So here's what happened. That's just the way it goes. Like, you can't help that if you don't work through how it's affecting you, that you're feeling abandoned, that you're feeling lost, you're just going to internalize that. And here's what it'll sound like. Well, what's wrong with me? Because that was the track I had playing in my head. What's wrong with me? Why do people always leave me? What's wrong with me? Why don't people like me? That's the rejection wound. We'll talk about more tomorrow. Abandonment and rejection go so hand in hand. And it's not impossible, but it's so hard not to have one of those two wounds. They are core wounds because at the end of the day, like, people leave. Nothing stays. It's just all part of the growth cycle. And so if we aren't taught how to work through that, if we don't have the resiliency that we need, then of course we're going to develop an abandonment wound. And there's a lot that needs to be worked through there, honestly. There's a lot that needs to be worked through there. And depending on when that onsets, you can keep peeling back layers, possibly. That's what I did. When that onsets, it will lodge and show up in ways in your life that you're just like, if you have an abandonment wound, you might leave before you're left. That's the thing I used to always do. I would leave before I was left. I would lock my emotions down because they didn't feel safe. I would wear my armor, my invincible, independent armor, like a badge of honor. I don't need anybody, right? Abandonment wound will do that. You become your own caretaker. And or you also minimize your needs and wants. You're like, I don't need anything. I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm always fine. I don't know if any of that sounds familiar. I had all of it, plus more probably. And so that's still something that I'm working through because, like, that happened to me at such a young age. I was 3, maybe 2. That happened to me at such a young age that I didn't even realize it developed and became a part of my personality. Crusty. And I didn't know. And now I'm like, great, wonderful. Now we've got something else to work through. We love this, right? And so it's just a matter of, like, awareness, action, regulation. Once I became aware that I was like, oh my God, my emotions are really like a live wire. And they're almost impossible to regulate. We got to take some action, right? So that is why this self-awareness is so important. And so many times people are afraid, myself included, to dig in to the self. I was not a happy girl when I looked up all the things about BPD and was like, shit, I have all of them. I have all of them, every single one. I was so embarrassed. I was like, what is wrong with me? Oh, there it is. I was like, this sucks. I really was. I was like, yeah, great. Love myself right now. But you do. You got to love yourself anyway. It just is what it is. And once you become aware of it, you can work through it. Name it, claim it, and move the hell on, you know? And so it's like, okay, now I know. I've got this really deep abandonment wound. And I've really had to reframe on a lot of levels, not just cognitively, but emotionally, belief-based. There's a lot of ways in which we have to work this stuff out. That I'm like, all right, well, if people don't stay, then like, that's okay. I don't want people here that don't want to be here. And so the abandonment wound is one that I would say probably almost everybody's got. I don't want to say that because I don't like to overgeneralize, but I will say this is a biggie because we've got a lot of divorces out there. We've got death all the time. I mean, even you can have it as like, I have a friend who went away to the military and his sister was so upset by it. Like she never fully recovered because she was 13 and he was 17. And that was like her person. And all he just, you know, he left to do a job, to do a service. So perceived loss matters as well. And it's such a tough thing to figure out at the time because it's like, we don't always have the language. At 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you don't have the language for like, oh, they left me, or I feel like they left me. And then we show up in our relationships, in our life, and all these patterns come out. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense why that's happening. Why I'm picking this kind of person, why I'm acting this kind of a way. I'm functioning out of a wound that has cultivated a belief that I didn't even realize I was functioning out of, right? And so the abandonment wound is one that if any of this resonates whatsoever, do research on it. Because if you have an abandonment wound, that is one you want to start triaging right away. Emotional abandonment leads to lots of problematic relationship issues, okay? So if you have that, and it can even, I just got a thought here, it can even come on later in life if you get like a divorce or, and I never, you know, someone passes on later. It doesn't have to be 0 to 14. Those are just when that happens, it cements there. And a lot of us don't realize things happen there. But if it happens at 20, 25, 30, 35, like this can happen at any point in life because it's hard for us to deal with loss. When you lose a parent, when you lose a child. I mean, I have relatives who, when they lost their parent, they are still not okay. And they were 40 and their parents were 70 and they got an abandonment wound. Do you know what I mean? Like it can come out of any time, any place, anywhere. And so it's just important to be mindful about it. And this is why you want to work through loss or perceived loss, because loss is a natural part of life. And so the better we can get at it, and again, it's never easy to lose things, but the more we reframe our beliefs, the more we work through our own stuff, the easier it gets. I will say that, because you're not afraid to lose anything anymore. It doesn't hurt less. It's just like, it's okay. It hurts, but it heals too. You're like, okay. And so, the abandonment wound is a really big one. It's a big one. And so many of us function out of it. And like I said, I've been working through that emotional stuff for 4 years before I figured out that like at the core of my emotional issues is a disorder. Like I had no idea. It took me 4 years to figure that out, and continual growth work. So this sort of journey is not for the faint. Honestly, it's not for the faint of heart. Learning yourself, self-awareness, emotional awareness, not easy, not for the faint of heart. I will tell you that. But if you want to change your perspective, change your awareness, and change your life, you go and do it because you want freedom. You want to win. You want to know yourself. You want to show up and get everything that you want. And so with that being said, I hope that that was helpful. I hope you don't mind me sharing a little bit of my own journey with you. And if you like what you're hearing, like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell. And this is going to be a really cool series, guys, and we'll talk more about it. And then, like I said, Seasons and Signs Academy opens January 9th. That link is going to be in the description in a couple of days. And we'll just work on healing, growth, and winning, because that's what we're all here for, right? Right. See you guys in the next one.